the writing process. I'd like you to take a moment and think about what is included in your writing process. Think about the last time you wrote an essay, or maybe even a poem or a story. Ask yourself what steps you took while you were writing that essay. Just take a moment and try to reimagine where you were in the kinds of things that you did from the beginning of the process to the end. Don't forget to download the interactive questions on Canvas so that you can follow along on this video. For copyright purposes, I cannot play this link here, the Tune Yards Water Fountain podcast episode, but I require that you play it on your own and to answer this question. Essentially, this is a podcast called Song Exploder, and the link will take you to the episode that breaks down this song called Water Fountain by a band called the Tune Yards. Okay. I would like you to write down the songwriter's process for creating your song. She breaks it down in that podcast. Now, the creative process is not just limited to creative writers or songwriters or artists. Writers, even in an academic setting or in an academic paper or even a blog, use a process in order to write something of quality. So again, for copyright purposes, I cannot play this video on my video, but I do ask that you go to the slides that I've included and play this video on your own and take Cornell notes in response while you watch the video. I've given you space in the interactive handout for you to take those notes. That guy had a lot of steps, didn't he? It's a really cool video. I really like the illustrations, and I like how he breaks down all the different things he does, things you didn't even realize would go into writing a blog. It's kind of surprising, isn't it? So keep in mind that every time you write a paper, you're never just going to sit down, type it out, turn it in. That's not how you turn in quality work, okay? Readers don't want to read your last minute efforts. They don't deserve to spend time reading something you didn't plan, think through, or revise. So by engaging in the writing process, you're essentially respecting your reader. So in this class, I have very specific steps I want you to go through while you write an essay. These steps fix many common errors writers make. They help you organize and generate thoughts and motivate and ignite ideas. For this reason, you must do all of these steps for each essay you write for this class. And most likely, you will be writing them throughout your college career. The first step in the writing process is to underline and annotate the prompt or the task that you have to write in response to. Every essay comes with a prompt you must follow to meet the objectives of the assignment. In order to successfully meet the requirements of the prompt, you need to underline the main ideas and write in the margins to clarify each essay requirement before beginning the next step. Keep in mind that the easiest way to fail an essay is to not follow the prompt. If, for example, you were Shakespeare and you were in my class and I assign an essay asking for you to write about your cat or your favorite pet, and you wrote Hamlet and you turned it in, I would love that play. That, you would have produced one of the best plays in Western civilization. But I would still give you an F on the assignment because you did not follow the prompt. Okay. So it's very important that you follow the elements and tasks the teacher has given you so that you do not lose points, because each task you do not follow in your essay, the more points that you will lose. So it's helpful to have your interactive handout handy, and you can underline as we move along through these slides. So take a moment to underline what you think the main ideas of the prompt is, and I'll go ahead and read it. What is the purpose of college? Is it to, quote, get a job, as Kaplan argues from the reading? Or is it to shape you into a, quote, good citizen, as Ramsey argues? Support your own point of view by sharing your own reasons for going to college. How do your choices reflect your opinion? Include at least one passage or point from Kaplan's article or interview and/or Ramsey's article, and respond to explain who you agree with more. After you underline the main ideas, you annotate the prompt. So, as you can see here in this slide, I have underlined what I consider to be the main ideas of the prompt, things that you need to make sure that you follow or do, or notes to self to make sure that you follow the prompt correctly. To annotate, you're going to annotate very much like you would an article, like we've read for class so far. You might want to ask questions, reiterate what you think you understand of the prompt or not, write notes to self for your own essay. Start to already mold these tasks into prompts for yourself and what you will write specifically and what your point of view is. You can test out your understanding of what you think the professor is asking you to do, but just make sure you say it in your own way. And point out specific instructions and tasks that you think you might forget or that you think are very important to include. Okay? So, what might that look like? Well, here's an example. As you're used to by now, I've color coded in the margins what comments goes to what piece of text I'm referring to. So over here in the yellow, it says, "What is the purpose of college?" In the margin, I wrote, "Well, what does she mean by purpose? Why does someone go to college?" So here I asked a question that maybe I won't understand what purpose means. Maybe I need to see it in a different word so that I can respond more clearly. I pose another question afterwards. Why does someone go to college? That is me trying to say it in my own words so that I truly understand what it means for college to have a purpose. Over on the right, I refer to, is it to get a job or to be a good citizen? Okay. And I wrote three choices: agree with one or the other, or a bit of both. In fact, there might be four choices. You could agree with neither, but you'd have to explain yourself. By translating those two options that way in the margin, that helps my brain narrow down to the choices that I actually have. Okay. On the left in green, I highlighted choices support your opinion, and I wrote, how does my major or decision to come to college reveal? I think it's for job training or for my personal development. All right. So again, I've narrowed down my choices so that I'm not thinking every choice, might be important. I need to narrow it down so I'm not thinking of all choices. I'm only thinking of a couple, and that'll help me make a decision. Um, Over here in the blue, I highlight support point of view, sharing your own reasons for going to college. And I said, I need to describe why I came to college, chose my major. This will be evidence. Now, that may not be everyone's evidence. Some people may not talk about their major, although I think that would be pretty important. Or maybe you would just talk about the career you want when you get out of college, or what are your plans after you get out of college. Um, Down at the bottom in purple, I write who I agree with more. What should I include in my essay? This is important because I can already predict some students might forget to put a quote in from Kaplan or Ramsey. That's common. I'm not sure why, but usually around the end of the prompt, they forget to read the prompt completely and double check to ensure that they've put in all the tasks that the teacher wants. Okay, so don't forget to do that. Make sure you review that bottom task there. This is a very typical prompt that a college professor will give you. There's a series of questions, and they have embedded in them keywords and phrases that essentially turn into tasks that will embed and find themselves in the essay. Okay, so by annotating and underlining the prompt, you are ensuring that you are following the prompt and that you don't miss any points later on. It's also important for students to understand what they're writing about, right? And if you're having a hard time and you have questions, by annotating the prompt, you can essentially figure out what you don't understand, which is really good because then you can go up to the teacher and ask, hey, professor, I don't quite understand what you mean here by purpose of going to college. This is how I read it. Is that correct? That lets the teacher read something that they can react to, right? It's like, oh, I see what you're trying to say here. That's very close. Maybe if you altered it a bit. And then by just asking a simple question and restating in your own words, uh, you prevented yourself from making a mistake in the essay. Okay. It's a lot easier for a professor to be able to give you feedback if you've given them an example of your understanding. And so annotating the prompt and underlining the main ideas lets you do that. The next step is to rewrite the prompt in your own words. After underlining the main ideas in the task and annotating them, your next step involves comprehending or understanding the prompt. The easiest way, again, to not pass an essay is to not follow the prompt. And the easiest way to ensure you are fulfilling the objective of the assignment is to write the prompt in your own words to prove to yourself and others that you truly understand the task. And again, if you have any questions, you can copy and paste that rewritten prompt into the questions on Canvas, or you can come to my office hours and I can make sure that you're following the prompt correctly. Okay, now it's your turn. You try. Rewrite the prompt in your own words. Try to only carry over what you think is important. Don't use the professor or my words or phrases. Ask yourself, how do you understand it? Write it in your own way, as if maybe describing it to a friend. If you can't say it in your own words, ask, do you truly understand what the professor's asking you to do? Because if you can say it in your own words and you don't use the professor's phrases, and you're confident in your interpretation of the prompt, then you know that you understand what the professor's asking you to do. If you don't, it's best to ask the professor if you're on target or if you're understanding the prompt correctly. Or even better yet, go to a tutor and show them. Another step I find helpful in understanding the prompt and making sure that you follow it is to turn the tasks into questions. So you break the prompt up into like bullet points or specific questions that you follow as a guide throughout the rest of your essay. For example, on the left column, I've got what is the purpose of college? That comes directly out of the prompt. That gets translated into a task or a question that you would answer in the essay. And I wrote, why to go to college in the first place. If I answered that question, it would be answering the other question. Okay. What is a good citizen or to get a job becomes from the reading, who do I agree with more and why? Is college meant to help me gain skills for a job or help me grow as a person? Okay. By answering that question in my essay, perhaps in every paragraph, right, you would be following the prompt. Here's another task. Support your point of view with reasons for going to college. That became, for each paragraph, I need a story that reveals who I made a decision or chose my major or what I want to do with my life, right? So each task gets folded into the essay. You answer the questions from each task and you make sure that they end up in your essay in some way. Okay. And that way you will be following the prompt. All right. Now that we've turned the tasks into questions and we figured out what we're actually going to write about, or at least write in response to, let's do the next step, free writing. Now, the majority of you have spent the majority of your life learning how to write. Okay. You've been learning since, kindergarten or even in preschool. And so you might think or get the feeling that writing is a natural process. Okay. But it's not. Writing is actually a technology that was not developed until about 5,000 years ago. Okay. And even then, we've only had the writing where you tell stories, right? For like 4,000 years. So before that point, when we did come up with writing initially, it was for commerce. It was like ticks on a tablet to show how many sheep you owned versus how many sheep I bought from you, right? So they were like receipts. But it evolved into, hieroglyphics, and it evolved into writing letters and that would represent speech and things that we would say. And so the first things that were written down were the stories that we told. Okay. The oldest story recorded in writing, I believe, is the story of Gilgamesh, okay, in Mesopotamia. That is not the oldest version of that story, and there are in fact older stories told before that time, but that was the first one that was written in writing. So just know that we've been a civilization, or a modern civilization, for about 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, we came up with agriculture. Okay. But as a species, the Homo sapiens species has been around 300 to 400,000 years. And we met the Neanderthals in Europe about 50,000 years ago. We've been here for a really long time. And most of the time we have been on this earth, we have not been writing. Okay. So what were we doing before that point? We were talking, okay? We were telling stories, we weren't writing them. So it's important to remember that writing is not actually a natural process, and neither is reading. These are technologies that we've come up with to interpret the world around us and to do something new with the world around us. And because it's not natural, it's very hard to just jump into writing and expect something good to come out of it, right? That's why we have all of these steps in this process to help us begin writing. So what free writing does for us is it helps us get into the writing mode. It takes something that is not necessarily a natural process for us as human beings, but gets us used to this idea that this is what we're doing now, and reintroduces this to your brain. Okay. So free writing is a really useful tool to get us into the writing mode. Okay. Free writing is a wonderful strategy to help you get your brain thinking about the topic and all the ideas you might potentially write about. Free write without stopping or worrying about grammar, all the ideas you may include in your essay. This will help you generate ideas and warm up your brain. All right, with your interactive handout ready, set a timer for 3 minutes. And you're going to free write to activate schema and get into the writing mode. You're going to use the prompt you wrote in your own words, or you can use the tasks that I've listed below to help you write and just get some ideas for what things you might discuss in your essay. Okay. The key here is to write without stopping. So if you find yourself not knowing what to write, just write down what you're thinking. You could even write, I don't know why I'm writing. Free writing, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I'm just going to keep writing because the clock is ticking. You'll find that eventually you'll get back on topic. Okay. Know that you may or may not use any of this in your essay. This is just trying to get you to gather some ideas that might go in your essay so they're easy to grab. They're easy to think about because you've now collected them through the writing process. The next step is to brainstorm. Okay. People use this term vaguely. Okay. And it can mean a lot of things. Some people call free writing brainstorming. And indeed, it is a version of brainstorming. Okay. When I say the word brainstorming, I mean clustering or webbing or bubble charting. Okay. It's usually a visual representation of what something might look like, and you put things in categories and bubbles. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to read through your free write or any new ideas you have from the free write, and you want to put them into categories, and you want to put them into categories that you can see. Okay. Write about anything. You can't write about everything. So circle themes and branch off different things associated with those themes. What you're essentially doing here is you are using the brain's ability to visualize and put things in specific categories. Okay. Case in point, you can only write about one topic per body paragraph. Each body paragraph focuses on just one reason right? That supports your thesis. And so you want to use brainstorming to collect like thoughts together so you don't go off of topic in the middle of your essay. Also, some people they write an essay with a topic that's very vague or way too general. For example, you couldn't write a 5 paragraph essay on Star Wars and expect it to be very good because that topic is too big. I mean, huge books have been written about that series or that franchise, right? So you couldn't write just 5 paragraphs and expect the essay to say anything new or worthwhile. But you could narrow your topic down to focus just on one character or just on one piece of technology from that franchise. So that's why we use brainstorming. Now, I understand for those of you who are typing this, it might be difficult to brainstorm on the interactive handout. So I came up with a way to brainstorm in list form. So you can just make a category at the top of a list and then write all of the potential topics or ideas below it. And then you can move on to another topic and another list, and that, and then list anything that's relevant below that. That would simulate the brainstorming or webbing process in text. If you're doing this by hand, I highly suggest using the bubble chart over on the left of the slide. But either way works. So go ahead and take a moment and brainstorm the different topics you may write about in your essay. All right, now that we've free written and we've brainstormed, let's start taking our ideas in our notes and translating them into essay form. The next step is to outline. And most of you will be familiar with this process. You essentially decide on what your topic is, you make decisions on what your points might be, and you give yourself a little map that you can follow while you write the essay. An outline could look something like this on the right side of the screen, where it says an outline for a descriptive essay, and there's bullet points here for each body paragraph. Okay. So essentially, you want your outline to resemble the shape of an essay or what an essay looks like. And as you've learned in the previous lecture, when I gave you a review on what goes into an essay, your outline will essentially bullet point the main ideas of each of the body paragraphs. And some outlines can be pretty descriptive. You might have a lot of things in your outline that are bullet pointed and not just main ideas. You might give yourself cues for specific quotes you might include in your essay or examples. So, what might a outline look like? Well, there's different ways that you could write an outline. Some are more thorough than others. Here is an example. Here is a potential or a example prompt that I came up with, my educational challenge and how I overcame it. Okay. And in response to that prompt, this person wrote an outline and it looks something like this. They started with their topic or their thesis. Example number one, and it said, I don't have a reliable car, money for gas. And they overcame it by asking for rides. All right. Note how it answered the question of the prompt, what their educational challenge was and how they overcame it. And they answered that in their draft thesis. Then in their first body paragraph, they're going to talk about the challenge of having to walk to school or ask for rides. In the second body paragraph, they're going to talk about how they're tested out different methods to overcome the obstacle, like asking friends for rides or taking the bus. In the third paragraph, they found out that their student ID was also a free bus pass, so now they take the bus, right? That outline satisfies the prompt, okay? But that's not the only way you could satisfy that. You could outline it in another way. So this example says in their thesis, I have a long work schedule, which is their educational challenge, and they overcame it by asking for time off and sisters for doing more work around the house. And that's how they overcame their educational challenge. In their first paragraph, they say that they're going to describe their full-time work schedule. What that does is it's establishing and describing their educational challenge. The second paragraph describes the housework they have to do when they get home. So that is another educational challenge that they have to deal with. In the third one, they provide the solution. They asked the sisters and the family to help with the chores so that they could study. It is different from the other outline, but they both satisfy the same prompt. Now, here's a third way you could organize that essay. Thesis draft, study skills, and they overcame it by going to a tutor. And study skills essentially meant that they didn't have the study skills and they needed them. Okay, that was their educational challenge. In the first body paragraph, they would discuss their struggle. They didn't learn to study in high school and they didn't read very much, so they didn't remember stuff. Okay, and so what that's doing is it's telling the story of how they discovered they had this educational challenge. In paragraph 2, they explain how they're not sure how to catch up in their math class and that they are worried. Okay, so the first paragraph kind of gives them a general, I don't really know how to study. And the second one kind of narrows it down a bit. Okay, this is an immediate problem in my math class. And in the third paragraph, they tell the story of how they talked to their English teacher. She showed them where the tutoring center was for writing. And from there, I found out they have tutors for all subjects and signed up for weekly tutoring in all my classes to overcome the gaps in my learning and stay focused on my schoolwork. All right. So those are 3 different ways that you could organize your essay in response to just a prompt. Okay. So not everyone's going to organize their essay in the same way. Some people might focus more on other things than another student. But as long as you answer everything in the prompt, you should be okay. All right, with your interactive handout handy, let's do the next activity, the prompt outline strategy. I would like you to use the activity from turn tasks into questions to ensure you answer all the questions on the prompt. So you want to review that, right? Because you kind of already broken down all of the things you need to do in order to fulfill the prompt. And that will help you write your outline. And in the handout, I've got a space for you to write out how, the shape your paragraphs might take, what topics you might focus on. Here is an example of one way you could do it. Maybe in the first body paragraph, I wrote down you could outline one reason why you think college is to get a job, right? Or how you think it's for your own creative development as a human being, right? It could be one or the other, or a variety of the two. Then after that, you might want to include an example of why you're in college. How does that support, your understanding of why you're in college or your understanding of the purpose of college, right? If, for example, you say that your purpose in college is to get a job and you're a drama major and you don't know what kind of job you're going to get out of school, it doesn't necessarily reflect, right, your point. I have to know, okay, well, if you're a drama major and you're specifically in school to get a job, these 2 things don't add up. So in your explanation, you're really going to have to argue for why your choice is supporting your purpose, right? In the body 2 paragraph, you might say your reason why you're getting to school is either job or education. You might, put in an example of what your major is and explain how your example supports your reasons. And in the third paragraph, you might focus on one of those articles, and you would include the one you agree with more and why, or the person you disagree with, or the person or the 2 that you sort of agree with. You might not completely agree with either of them. But again, if you do that, you have to support and explain why you do or you don't. Okay. So just go ahead and take a moment to try writing an outline of, what you think you're going to write about in each body paragraph. Give yourself a little map to help guide you while you're drafting your essay. Now, the next step is drafting. It's essentially your first attempt at trying to write a complete essay. Some students handwrite their drafts. I certainly do, changing and editing as they type the final version into the computer. Some students type drafts directly onto the computer, but end up rewriting most of it before they finish. The rough draft is meant to be changed. It is not the final draft. It's a no stress draft, a best you could do the first time around draft. It must be complete enough to be taken seriously during a workshop, but can contain some erroneous errors and pieces you wanted to share or were unsure about before moving on to the revision process. So, again, the drafting process is still complete. It would still be fulfilling the assignment, but it's just your best shot at it, knowing that you're going to go back and you're going to change a whole bunch of stuff later. Okay. This is just your first attempt at writing the essay. Now, after you've drafted your essay, you're going to peer review it. All right. You're going to share it with other people and get their feedback. This is important because the purpose of writing is communication. And so the purpose is to be able to take the writing and give it to somebody else and have them read it and understand it. Okay. In an essay, you're going to take one step further, and your purpose as a writer in a college essay is to convince them of something, to persuade them. Okay. And so you have to test it out, quote unquote, in the wild. You have to give it to a reader. You can't speak for it. It should just be able to stand on its own and successfully convince or persuade that reader. And that's why we have peer review. Now that you've drafted and you've given it to some peers to look at and gotten some feedback, you're going to incorporate that feedback into what we call a revision. All right. This is a fundamental step to the writing process. After you have completed the peer review step above, you review your notes and you start over. Rewrite your essay from start to finish, only keeping the elements from the rough draft that are worth keeping. Now, keep in mind that most of the content in a revision should be new. All right. Your first attempt, your first draft is not going to be very good. It was your first version. All right. The second version, incorporating feedback, should be a complete overhaul of that paper. Okay. And that makes for a very successful essay, or at least it ups the potential that your essay is successful and you get a good grade. Now, it's at this point you might be thinking, holy cow, that's a lot of steps. And yeah, that is a lot of steps to writing. But these are really important and they're fundamental to writing something worth reading. Okay. Professional writers do this all the time. I do this. I'm writing a book right now, and I do this for every single chapter. I mean, you know, if you saw the stack of papers I have of notes and free writing and outlining and drafts upon drafts and feedback, you know, it's quite a lot of work. You know, writing is not easy. It takes a lot of practice. But professional writers, for example, J.K. Rowling, when she wrote Harry Potter, it took her 5 years to write the first one. Right. And you might be thinking, okay, well, she had to work, you know, and she had kids and she had other things to do. So it just took her a long time to write it. Well, after it became a national success or an international success, and she had all the resources at her disposal, she had lots of money. She didn't need to work anymore. All she did was write, which is working too, right? All she had to do was write. It still took her 2 to 3 years on average to finish each book. That's with everything at her disposal. That's with editors. That's with, you know, not having to do anything else but write. Okay. So she's a professional writer, and I guarantee she did all of these steps to make Harry Potter as good as it is today. Okay. So, you know, don't just write your essay at the last minute, and don't have your first draft be your last draft, because it will be really obvious when your teachers get it, and your grades will be reflected accordingly. Okay. I also encourage you to please, please, please go to tutoring. Okay. This is the perfect time to go to tutoring. You can give them the prompt, you can have them work on this with you. You can, you know, show them the prompt and they'll help you come out with an outline, right? You don't have to do the outline on your own. You can work with a tutor to come up with an outline. You can draft a paragraph and show it to them. You can do that for every paragraph you write for the essay. You could write the draft, which is going to be due on, I believe, Sunday anyway. And, you know, if you did it early, you could, you know, give it to a tutor, and then they can look at it and give you feedback before you even get feedback from your peers. Okay. So it's very important to understand that, yes, there are a lot of steps. A lot of them are pre-writing. You know, you set a timer for 2 to 3 minutes. So it's not as long as maybe it seems, even though this is a really long lecture, right, it's not going to take this long in the future because you'll be quick. You won't be going through these slides and learning the process over again, right? But it is important, and I do expect you to do this for every essay from here on out. All right, we're nearing the end here. I would just like you to reflect on the process and the lecture as a whole. What was your writing process in the past before you started college? So go ahead and list the steps of the things that you did before you wrote an essay in college, maybe when you were in high school or the last attempt at college. What were the steps that you took? Question 2, what do you think of the process now? What step did you find most helpful? Okay. And do you think these steps will help you avoid a common error you have made in your writing in the past? That question requires you know two things. One, what common error you were making in the past in your writing. Everyone has had them. I used to have what they call comma splices, which is like commas everywhere. Comma, 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 and there weren't enough periods. Okay. So that was my error when I was a young writer. So what is your error? You don't even have to know the name of it. You can just describe it. And what step that we've covered today do you think will help cut that error down, or at least prevent that error from happening too often?